Today's video does contain some sensitive subject matter, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. Also, if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. This was actually something that happened to me, and I still struggle to understand it. As a younger child, maybe 7 or 8, I think, I lived in a small house with an older brother that I'll call Jeff. He was probably 4 or 5 years older than me, and we lived with my dad and my pregnant mother. I didn't get along with my brother, or rather, he didn't get along with me. It was just the two of us, so of course I wanted to play and hang out with him, but it was like he hated me. I don't know why or if I did something, but if so, I don't remember ever doing anything. It started as Jeff just not wanting to have anything to do with me. I would ask if he wanted to play cars or something, and he would say no. When one of us complained about being bored, my parents would tell us to go play together, and he would get mad at me for it. He would tell me things like he hated me and he didn't want to play with me, so I would end up playing something alone, while he sat on his bed and stared at the ceiling or watched TV. We had an old, small TV in our room that got probably 4 channels. Sometimes while we were alone, like in our room or out back playing, he would hit me or push me down. He would call me names, say I was useless, and all for no apparent reason. We could just be taking turns going across the monkey bars in our playset, and he would snap. And if I told my parents, he would then punish me when we went to bed, so I had a lot of accidental falls and trips, and my parents were none the wiser. So that's where this incident takes place. Jeff was becoming more and more aggressive towards me. Anytime that he could, he would. He would even try to hurt me with anything that he could find, like stabbing my arm with a pencil or making me step on thumbtacks. One night, after dinner, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth, and Jeff knocked on the door and kept demanding that I get out. So I finished quickly, and as I left the bathroom, I said something to him about being patient, and as I walked past him, he pushed me, causing me to fall down the stairs. However, my mom was just walking by and actually saw him do this, so he did get into a lot of trouble with it. I was more scared that he got in trouble than happy, because I could feel the anger in him, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to sleep that night. So, we went to bed as normal. We had bunk beds, and he was on the top. I remember that I tried to stay awake as long as possible, worried that he would hurt me, but the sleep won, and I ended up drifting off. But then I woke up when I felt pressure on my chest. It was Jeff sitting on top of me, and he looked furious. That's when I noticed that I couldn't breathe. I felt like I couldn't inhale at all and was trying to tell Jeff to get off. He just kept saying these horrible things to me, like he wished he was still an only kid, that I was the worst brother, that my parents didn't love me, and that I should just die. I remember being terrified for my life. I could feel something around my throat, and it was starting to hurt. I was kicking and swinging my arms, doing everything I could to get him off of me, but to no avail. The last thing I remember was the room going black, and then I could hear my mom screaming and crying my name. I could hear my dad yelling, "What did you do?" And then everything went muffled again, and I believe I went unconscious. That was the last memory that I had of Jeff. I've tried very hard to remember anything after that, but I can't. and I start feeling sick when I do try. Because now, things are completely different. I now live with my mom and dad who look completely different. My first mom had short, curly black hair, and she was also really short compared to the massive man that my dad was. He was also bald and had a really deep voice. My new mom is almost taller than my dad, and she has medium-length brown straight hair. My new dad was thin and definitely shorter than my old dad. He also had longer blonde hair that he normally kept braided, and he was always so soft-spoken. The other weird thing is, I'm now an only child. I remember waking up one day and following a normal routine of making my own breakfast and watching cartoons until my parents got up and took me to school. But then, I started getting these visions or recollections of Jeff, and it seemed so real. I know that it was. I remember the pain that I endured. I remember the scent of my mother's perfume. I remember the feeling of the scar on my father's hand. When I started remembering this, I became scared that maybe I did survive and was given to another family. I was afraid to bring it up because I didn't want to know what happened. I did miss my old parents, but I thought maybe they got in trouble too. So I always kept this to myself. I have gotten the two memories mixed up though, because I'll mention something that happened in my first life, and my new parents will look confused and mention how that never happened, or that they don't remember anything like that. So now, I find it difficult to bring up past memories unless the memory actually involves my new parents, so I at least know that it was this life. There was one time, though, that I had to ask. It was the weekend, and my parents took me to a local amusement park to celebrate. I completed the school year with all passing grades, which wasn't hard for me, as I always excelled at school, but it was nice to have it recognized. And I was accepted into an after-school club that focused on a different country each year. This year would be France. The kids would also have a chance to go to the country with one parent or guardian the following year. My parents were both very proud of me, and it was the most fun I've ever remembered having. I played games with them, all of us being competitive. We rode on a few rides together, and we had a wonderful dinner. I felt incredibly loved that it was overwhelming. And I had slipped out something about thanking them for changing my life. They were confused and asked what I meant by that, and I tried to play it off as just miswording something, but they didn't buy it and they asked me to explain. I then asked them if I had another brother, and they denied it, looking genuinely confused. I then mentioned what I remembered about Jeff. About feeling like he was hurting me, without being specific, like I needed to protect them. They looked concerned, and I just remember my mom gave me a huge hug and told me that it must have been a very vivid dream that I'd had. Maybe when I was really sick, but she assured me that nothing like that had ever happened. They assured me that I had always been an only child, and that they knew no one by the name of Jeff. I wanted to make myself believe that everything I remembered, years of that life, it was all just an incredibly vivid dream. But after hearing more about my illness, it really made me think that maybe I was reborn. I didn't and still don't remember anything in this life about being ill, and nothing before it. My parents showed me pictures of being in the hospital. Apparently I had caught strep throat, and it ended up turning into pneumonia. They learned from this that I had an autoimmune disease, and the pneumonia caused me to go into a coma. The doctors warned my parents that they should be prepared for the worst, and that I was probably too young to fight it. Miraculously, I started showing improvements, and I did beat it. I have no memory of getting sick, ever being in a hospital, or even getting out of it, and anything before getting sick. Since then, I've pretty much decided in my mind that I died that night. I think that my brother killed me, and I think that the boy that this body belonged to died, and for some reason that I still don't understand, I was given this body as a second chance. I don't like to dwell on it too much, because it starts making me depressed. I loved my brother, but no matter what I did, he hated me. He hated me to the point that he wanted me dead. And the fact that I got a second chance while another boy probably lost his life, it makes me feel like I'm not grateful enough for what I have. I still haven't talked to my parents about all of this, as I do fear the outcome. Would they believe me? Would they make fun of me or deny that it was even possible? Or would they disown me, thinking that I'm not their real son? My parents are still very loving and supportive to this day, so I don't think that they would, but it is a fear that I have. I think that, for now, I'll just keep it to you and your audience and be thankful for what I do have. And also, thank you for allowing me to share this with somebody. My mother has always been such a giving person. My parents tried to have kids, and after years of no luck, they went to the doctor to learn that due to cysts, she would probably never conceive. So, instead, they adopted me at the age of 2 and fostered many children in between. This also led my mother to start her own daycare so she could be helpful to others in need, as well as be around as many children as she wanted. She was always so kind and supportive to everyone, and all the kids that we watched. It was no wonder that everyone liked her. She ran the daycare out of our home for most of the time that I lived there too, which meant that I helped a lot, but I didn't mind. It was like having little brothers and sisters any time to play with. My dad even built another large room to the back of our house as the main play area for the daycare. He even built a new door to the backyard with a covered porch that led to the yard with all the outdoor toys and games. The daycare was doing great, and since I grew up around so many kids, I found no reason to stop helping out. And, in fact, I started officially working there with my mom. And that's where this story took place. At this point, I was 23 and had been working there full-time for a few years now, while I went to school for children's psychology. I ran errands for my mom, like picking up groceries, and I helped with scheduling and making meals and snacks for the kids. We also planned special activities for the kids at least once a week. It was close to Mother's Day, so we had picked up some extra supplies for the kids to make gifts for their moms. We had materials to make cards, treat bags, and even paper flower bouquets. I loved walking around and helping them out, so we got them all in spots with like 4 or 5 kids at each table to split them up a bit. Now for the kids. We had about 16 kids there that day, because I remember one table empty, so we just put all the supplies on it. We had quite a few regulars, but would have newcomers join every so often too, which is when I met Blake. Blake was about 7, I believe. He could fully talk and hold a normal conversation with you. He loved sharks, and he could tell you just about anything about any shark that you named. I will add, though, that he had a cochlear implant in his left ear, as it will be relevant later. But you would never expect that he had hearing difficulties, as this boy could hear me from across the loud room. Blake had been coming to our daycare for about a month or so I was still trying to get to know him at the time. I sat at the table he was at, and I asked him and the other kids what they wanted to make, and they all wanted to start with a card. I laid out the markers, glue, stickers, and scissors, and I let them get started. And as I asked them about themselves and things their mom liked to help give ideas on what to make. Blake said that his mom loved tulips, but he didn't know how to draw them, so I showed him an easy way to do it. He said that he wanted to buy real tulips for her, because she was the best mom that he'd ever had. At the time, it sounded like a weird statement, but there could have been many reasons for having multiple mothers, right? So I didn't dwell on it. Then, one of the kids wanted to cut their card out in the shape of a heart, so I agreed and passed her the scissors. I noticed Blake staring at one of the other kids using the scissors, so I asked him if he wanted to cut out his card too, and he said yes. So, once the other one was done, I went to hand him the scissors, and he reluctantly grabbed them and just stared at them. I started to ask what was wrong, when he dropped them on the table in front of me and asked me to do it. I tried reassuring him that he could do it because they were safety scissors and he was given permission to use them because an adult was around. But I thanked him for being considerate or safe. He seemed a bit uncomfortable with the scissors near him, kinda like a kid would act when they saw an animal or something they were afraid of. So, I asked him if there was something wrong, and he explained further. He said he didn't like scissors because that was how he lost his ear. I was confused at first because, of course, he had both ears, but I knew about his implant. So, really, he just lost his hearing or never had it. So, I tried explaining to him that he had both of his ears, and he was referring to not being able to hear out of it. He confirmed this by nodding, and continued to tell me something a bit more disturbing. I may not remember the exact phrasing, but this is what he told me. In my old life, I hurt a lot of girls. I made them cry and I made them bleed, but one girl got away because I didn't tie the string right. I'm not good at tying my shoes either. I tried to catch her, and she grabbed some scissors and pushed them into my ear. It hurt really bad and it made me bleed, and I couldn't hear anymore. Then she put the scissors in my heart, and I died. So, I just sat there in shock of what I had just heard, and he must have seen the terror on my face because he followed that up with something like, "But it's okay. I don't want to hurt anyone now. I talked to God and he gave me another chance. But I lost my ear for good because of how bad I was. I'm a lot nicer now." And then he continued to stare at me and wait for me to cut out his card. After I looked at the other kids and noticed that they had paid no attention to his story and were still focused on their own projects, I just shook it off and cut it out. I watched him from there as he carefully picked the colors for his card and talked about his mom. He was his normal self. He never brought that up again or anything related to it. I had never heard him talk about anything so gruesome, so it really caught me off guard. Later on that day, I had a moment and I talked to my mom about it. She thought it was pretty alarming too, so she agreed to ask Blake's parents about it, thinking maybe he watched or saw something that he shouldn't have. They said they had never heard anything like that, and they also don't allow him to watch anything violent, so they had no clue where he could have gotten it from. They were surprised by what he said because they had never said anything to him, but did admit that when speaking about his implant before, he would claim that they were wrong as to why he had to wear it, but never clarified or explained anything further. I don't know why I was the chosen one to hear that story, but it was truly creepy, hearing it from a little kid like Blake. I've been trying to find some kind of story on a kidnapper or killer that was stabbed in the ear, but no luck yet. At the same time, I'm kind of scared to find something. Also, he's never mentioned anything since that day about his past life. and I'm not sure if I want him to or not. I don't think that my son is the same kid he once was. I mean, sure, he is the same person or body, but I don't think his mind or personality is the same. I know it sounds strange, but that's why I'm writing this, to further explain what I mean. My son's name is Cameron Michael, first and middle. He was born May 4th, 2007. He had brown, straight hair, taking after his mom as mine was blonde, and he always liked it on the longer side. We always let him decide what he wanted to do with his hair, never forcing him to grow it out or cut it. We just kept it managed, so either way, it wasn't in his face, but that was it. He was even beginning to like having half of his head shaved and keeping the other half long. He also enjoyed anything Marvel or insect related. He wasn't afraid to catch grasshoppers, crickets, pillbugs, or even spiders, although we wouldn't let him hold many spiders. I remember we even got him a bug-catching kit for his birthday the year prior, and he was ecstatic. He was also very outgoing. Anytime we ran into another kid at the park or at the mall, you name it, he was quick to approach them. He would introduce himself, and he would then ask them who their favorite superhero was. As for his name, he always wanted to be called Cameron. He didn't even like the idea of being called Cam for short. Just a few important things that I can think of that changed after this incident. Back in May of 2016, we celebrated his birthday, and his big present that year was a bike. He didn't really have one prior because we were living in an apartment, but we had recently moved into a rental home. He was really close to his cousin Brett, and he loved riding his bike when he was at his house, so we agreed to get him one this year. As expected, he was always wanting to ride it. When he got home from school, we had to practically barter with him to get his homework done before he went out to ride. My wife and I would typically walk alongside him to the park so we could ride around the path or the open parking lot without much traffic. It was a Sunday evening, and Cameron wanted to go ride his bike before it got late, since he had school the next day. It wasn't dark yet, so we didn't have to worry about lights, but he did have reflective lights on the bike, as well as his helmet. It was just going to be me and him as my wife was staying behind to clean up the kitchen. We left the house and started heading right towards the park. We pretty much lived behind it, so I was planning on walking down there with him, circling around, and then coming back home. Everything was fine until we started walking back home. There was a community board posted at the entrance, and sometimes they have events, and sometimes people like to leave their own dramatic notes, so I was glossing over it. Cameron was circling the parking lot, and I told him to give me a moment, and he continued to ride around as he's always done before. It was really no different than any other time, so I wasn't exactly worried about keeping my eye on him as long as I could hear him. But, to my horror, I also started hearing a car seemingly rev up really loud, getting closer, and then suddenly brakes squealing. I turned around, and I was faced with the worst thing to ever happen to me. Cameron was lying on the ground a few feet in front of this car, with his bike underneath it, all mangled up. I ran to my son expecting the worst. The rest of that night was a blur, and it was like I was standing still, but everyone around me was moving at hyperspeed. Yes, the person that hit him was arrested for reckless driving, and Cameron did turn out alright. He had several broken bones, but surprisingly, he only had a concussion and no other head or cranial damage. I'm still very thankful that we bought that helmet. However, after some time, I wasn't convinced that everything was alright due to the drastic changes in him that I witnessed. It was a little slow to get back to his normal playful and curious self, but I did start noticing things changing. One of the first was that he was not interested in Marvel or superheroes whatsoever. His birthday was Iron Man themed, but he seemed completely disinterested in it. His interests altogether had changed. Now, he was obsessed with trains and locomotives, which was fine, but it was also the amount of knowledge that he seemed to have about them. He got a book on them, and he was showing me the pictures and explaining the different parts on it and how it all worked. I asked him how he knew all this, like joking around. He just looked at me deadpan and said, "I used to work on them," and continued talking. He was 9 years old. How could he have possibly ever worked on a train? Other than the train thing, there were other personality changes such as the shows that he watched, or even activities and hobbies that he had. He started playing chess, and he was good at it from the start. Hell, he actually taught me how to play properly because I didn't know. He also cut his hair short, so it grew out evenly and parted it to the side, something he had never done before. He seemed fascinated in electronics, though, even things as simple as a desktop computer. He had seen it and even used it infrequently, but he always asked about how it worked, as if he had never actually seen it before. And one of the strangest things of all to me was the name part. He said he hated being called Cameron, and when asked, he said that he preferred to be called Cam or even Michael, but he then asked to be called Frankie. Again, I was confused because that was nowhere close to any of his names. I couldn't even recall any games or shows or movies that we watched that had someone with that name. So I again asked about the name, and he said, "Oh, that was my old name. My wife was home with us when this all happened, and she was just as confused." We tried to ask him more about the name, the train thing, all of it, and he just broke down. He said that he doesn't remember everything, but he thinks something happened when he got hit. He said that he doesn't think he's in the right body, and he didn't know how to live with it. Then he just cried, and we did everything we could to calm him down and try to cheer him up. We tried not to bring it up again in front of him, because we didn't want to upset him, but we tried to look into this a little more. We started with the therapist, to ask questions for ourselves. We had no intentions of putting him through that just because he had changed. Part of us thought that maybe he was just a growing boy. His personality could be changing. We were really stuck between that and could this be related to the accident? Could this have damaged something that went unseen? Could it just be him getting older and trying to find himself? But then my wife brought up the idea of past lives, and that she had started reading stories about them, and she thinks it may be related to Cameron's experience. We started looking into it more, and we tried to be open-minded, so I think that we both agree, without speaking too much about it, that this was likely the scenario, and we decided to live with this in mind going forward. Life went on as normal from then on. Slight changes in who he was, but we lived with it and called him Frankie at his request. We even told the rest of the family to do so that they didn't upset him. So, fast forward to 2021, we were all watching Unsolved Mysteries, and there was an episode about reincarnation, and Frankie lost it. He started talking about how that must be what happened to him, that he must have been reborn. My wife and I both just kind of went, "Wow, that's crazy and definitely possible," and tried to get on with our night. Again, he was still a kid, and we didn't want to put that thought in his mind. He should be able to enjoy his life, and not have some kind of crisis that he died and was born again. And things have calmed down a bit since that happened. Again, we tried to make it as normal as we possibly could. My wife and I have flirted with the idea of looking into someone who matched what we know so far of this Frankie person, but we don't even really know where to start. I just really hope it hasn't and doesn't impede on my son's life. I just want him to be happy with who he is, no matter who that happens to be. So that was this collection of past life stories. Stories that involve a past life of some sort, some way, shape, or form. I've done one of these before, and these stories are definitely bizarre. Some of the weirdest paranormal style stories I have ever read. And I genuinely love them. Mostly because they really fall into that unexplained category, don't they? Yeah. This was also video number, let's look at the calendar, 4 of our Halloween Extravaganza 2022, which is now the official name, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this collection of stories, and if you did, please do hit that thumbs up button, and if you would, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed and you like what you heard. Also, if you would feel so bold, leave me a comment down below. I promise I'll see it, and I promise I'll do everything I can to reply. You're free to comment whatever you want. Positive, negative, neutral, your decision. It is what it is. Yeah. You can also join the channel or go to Patreon where you get early access to content like this for as little as $1 a month. And you can hit the thanks button if you want to send a tip to the channel. Never ever expected, always, always appreciated. All that said, friends, I do hope that you're enjoying this week of content. We're on day 4 of 14, I think, is what I said. So that's, yeah. We got a long ways to go still, in other words. But that's 2/7. We're moving right along. And, of course, I do hope that I see you on the next video. But, my friends, until that happens, remember you are loved, you are important, you are valid, you are the best you that you can be. Never, ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, sleep well.